Hello Vault Heads, this is the self-proclaimed, sarcastically named Captain KeyForge, also known as PJ Broughton of the Steel City Snufflegators. And here we are again with the latest episode of Captain's Commpod. Thank you for joining me again. So, this week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about cards that in real life and not on the Crucible are a little bit trickier to manage than potentially others. So there are some cards that are really easy to deal with. You put it down, it's a creature, it goes down exhausted, fine, really easy to manage. There are some cards, however, that are not as easy to manage, and you need to, be paying quite a bit of attention to them to actually manage them correctly, and they're just a little bit more difficult to deal with. So this is what we're going to look at today. I've come up with the 10 that I think are the trickiest to sort of manage. So here we are. I'm going to go from easiest to worst, and at 10 I've got Dark Discovery, which is from the new set. It is an action card with an Amber Pip. Play, name 2 cards, discard the bottom 2 cards of your opponent's deck. If they are the named cards, purge the Dark Discovery and forge your key at no cost. Why do I think this is hard? Right, the only time I've used this in person, my opponent picked up the deck, flipped it upside down, pulled the 2 cards out, and then saw the card that was underneath, which could get you a warning in competitive play because you've seen information you shouldn't have seen. Actually drawing cards from the bottom of your deck in real life is not as easy as it sounds. So, this is the easiest one on the list, which is why it's here at 10, but you just think of actually how hard it is to sort of lift up your deck and pull off the bottom 2 cards without making a mess, without seeing the card that's underneath. So you can't flip your deck upside down. You have to pull the 2 cards out carefully, and yeah, it's a little bit fiddly. I don't dislike the card. I think the card's quite fun. If anything, I think it's borderline too easy as a set of 3 cards to get off. But yeah, drawing cards off the bottom of your decks is a bit tricky. So then at 9 I've got Ruins of Arconas, which is a Logos artifact with an Amber Pip, and it says play, put 4 Amber tokens on Ruins of Arconas from the common supply, archive a card. And then it says after a player plays their 5th card on a turn, if Ruins of Arconas is ready, move each Amber from Ruins of Arconas to that player's pool. Okay, so both of you, from the moment this goes down and is ready, so after the turn it's played, or until it gets destroyed, both of you, every time you play your hand, have to count how many cards you play. And the moment one of you plays 5 cards in a turn, you get all the Amber off this. So why do I think this is tricky? Well, again, you don't necessarily normally track how many cards you've played out of your hand in a turn. And while ever this is in play, you're both responsible for each other, so you both have to count how many cards have been played. Again, Crucible does it for you, lovely and automatic. In real life, I can see this catching a few people out occasionally as well, like myself included. It hasn't caught me out yet, but it may well do. So pay attention to that one if you get it. So then I've got to 8. The ulfbert device, Star Alliance artifact, Amber Pip. Each player cannot choose the same active house they chose on their previous turn. Okay, this one's there because it's too easy to forget. I think it's harder to manage than the other 2. I still don't think it's that hard to manage, but how easy is it for you to forget the house you picked last turn? Again, Crucible tracks it easy. In real life, and it's reciprocal as well, so especially if this is one of your opponent's cards, not yours, and you weren't expecting to deal with this, and it's there, and you've now got to deal with it, it's a bit tricky. This card would be a prime example of why I personally think we probably ought to have house tokens within the game. House tokens for things like Seismo Entangler, Tesmo, Restringuntus. This. Anytime something says someone can or cannot choose a specific house next time, I would argue that a house token ought to really be on it, because it would be quite easy to forget. And it's a good job the discard pile's there, because you could always look in the discard pile, but even then that could confuse you because you may just have used the board and not played any cards. So now we'll move on to number 7. Creature, logos, Cyberclone, 1 power, no armor, play, purge another creature. Until Cyberclone leaves play, it has the power equal to the purge creature's power and gains the creature's armor, keywords and traits, but not its text. Okay, so the fact that it doesn't take the text is a little bit confusing, because it's easy to read that wrong and think, right, I can copy send it to Shrix and spend the amber that's on Cyberclone. No, you can't. That's the ability of the card. It's not the keywords and the traits. It's a different thing. Also as well, you purge the card. Now, let's be honest, there are not that many ways in KeyForge to bring back a purged card. If this was me, I'd probably just agree to put the card that it's copied underneath it, sticking out, so we can see what it is. Because I shouldn't really be able to get that purge card back. But yeah, the fact that it copies something else and then that something else essentially leaves play and should go somewhere else, plus it copies some parts of it and others, again, in real life, now we start getting back to playing in person, I could potentially see this catching people out. So yeah, that's why that one's there. The next one is very, very similar. Logos, creature, Mimic Gel, 0 power and no armor. Mimic Gel cannot be played unless there is another creature in play. Mimic Gel enters play as a copy of another creature in play, except it belongs to House Logos. So this one is a direct copy. It copies traits, keywords, armor, power, ability. Again, if you copied a Shrix, whenever you reaped with this, you would be able to add amber to it, and you would be able to spend the amber on it, etc. Why do I think this is harder than the last one? Well, I think this one's harder than the last one because while the last one purges the creature, because it's purged and not that many cards purge, and certainly very few things bring purge back, it would be quite easy to just put the purge card underneath. This one, I've seen this played, and I've seen the card that it copied then go into discard. Literally, notes are against the rules, but I'd argue this one possibly needs a note. This one needs, it's in play and then write it's whatever it is and then put a note on it. I know notes are against the rules, but once the card that it's copied has left play, it could be quite easy to lose track of what that card copied. Okay, so my next one, we're at number 5 now, is an artifact. It's Brobnar, the big one, Amber Pip. After a creature is played, put a fuse counter on the big one. If there are 10 or more fuse counters on the big one, destroy each creature and artifact. So again, this one's in here because you both have to keep track of it, and every time a creature is being played, you both have to put a counter on it, both of you, because it's not just when you play a creature, it's when your opponent plays one as well. Again, it could be quite easy to lose track of putting the counters on it. Plus as well, adding 10 counters onto a card, that's quite a lot of counters actually to get onto a card. Like, there's enough room, but yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, again, use a chain tracker then. That'd be easier than counters. Use a chain tracker to count up to 10. And then when it goes to 10, it blows up. But the fact that it's reciprocal and it's just sitting there, it's yet another one that the Crucible will do for you automatically and do lovely and easily. But in real life, it's going to be quite easy to forget to put the counter onto the big one when you're playing creatures, especially if it's not your copy of the big one, if it's your opponent's. You know, if you're the one who's played that, really you ought to be remembering it. Okay, now I've got at 4. This is another new one from Dark Tidings. It's an artifact from Unfathomable, Effigy of Melaruk. Okay, after an enemy creature reaps, put an awakening counter on Effigy of Melaruk. If there are 6 or more awakening counters on Effigy of Melaruk, move it to a flank of your battle line as a creature with 100 power and 100 armor. Its text box is considered blank. 2 things about this one that's hard to manage. A, same as the last one, it's after a creature reaps. Not friendly, not enemy, just any creature. So I mean, I would argue the person who's played it again is probably the most responsible for it, but the rules don't say that. The rules say you're both responsible, so you've both got to remember every time you reap to put a counter on here. So that's the first thing about why I think it's mildly tricky and hard to manage. The second thing is 100 power and 100 armour. Did we really need to go so big? Bearing in mind the other most strongest creature in the game's like 24 power. Just, you know, I mean, so 100 power tokens we need on there, do we, if it potentially gets damaged? That's my issue with that one. So yeah, that's at 4. Next we'll move on to a set of 3 cards. We're at number 3 now, my third sort of hardest to manage and deal with. And it is the Untamed 3-card set from Dark Tidings, which are all creatures. Power 1 Chenille, Power 2 Armour 6 Bombix with an Amber Pip, and Power 9 No Armour with an Amber Pip Fifald. Chenille has the 6. Before action, return a Bombix from your discard pile to your hand. Power 2 Bombix, play, destroy a Chenille. If you do not, destroy Bombix. So you've got to have a Chenille in play to get Bombix down. Action, return a Fifald from your discard pile to your hand. And then 9, Fifald. Play, destroy a friendly Bombix. That's the middle card of the 3. If you do not, destroy Fifald. Fight, reap, fully heal Fifald in game 1. So great card if you can get it into play. So to get it into play, you've got to first have a Chenille, then play Bombix and destroy the Chenille, then you've got to play Fifald and destroy the Bombix. There's a lot of faff involved there. I mean, I've got nothing against them, and I think they're an interesting design space, but I wouldn't want them in my deck, and I think they're very difficult to be faffing around with and dealing with. Now we have got my second most sort of difficult to manage, hard to deal with faff card as it was, and it is an Unfathomable creature, power 10, no armour, General Sherman. Okay, deals no damage when fighting. Play, purge each other creature. If General Sherman leaves play, return to play each creature purged this way. Brilliant. So this thing creates its brand new discard, or its own specific discard pile, because anything that gets purged any way other than this can't return to the game unless you have Universal Recycle Bin. This thing, it purges all the creatures in play, and then when it leaves play, they all come back. They get put into play. Yeah, that's what it says, isn't it? Return to play each creature. So you put them back into play. You don't play them. The play abilities don't trigger. I can see that catching people out as well, potentially. But yeah, I mean, this card literally generates a brand new pile on your mat. Creatures purged by General Sherman. For both of you. Because I would argue they can't go into the standard purge pile, because what if somebody played Oubliette? Which creature was the creature purged by Oubliette, and which creature was the creature purged by General Sherman? So I don't dislike the card. I just think that creating a whole brand new card off the back of one card is a bit of a faff. And then we move on to number 1, and this is what I think is probably the hardest to manage in KeyForge. Spangler Box, artifact, logos. Action, purge a creature in play. If you do, your opponent gains control of Spangler Box. If Spangler Box leaves play, return to play all creatures purged by Spangler Box. So this is worse than the last one, because this creates its own brand new purge pile, purged by Spangler Box pile, because they can't go with the normal purged, because you're going to get confused. I mean, again, what about Infernus is common as heck in terms of how many people are playing it, and in the meta, and Oubliette and other things that purge. You know, if a creature gets purged, how do you know whether it was purged by Spangler Box or purged by Oubliette or Infernus or whatever? So you're going to need 2 purge piles. You're going to need the purge pile for the normal purge, and you're going to need the purge pile for Spangler Box in case someone destroys Spangler Box and everything else that's been purged via it gets put back into play. Which is why this is in my mind. And also as well, then there's the whole handing it back and forth between the two of you. So every time I use it, I have to give it to you, and every time you use it, you give it back to me. Whole lot of faff involved in that card, so that's why it's number 1. Beware of that if you have to deal with it in real life. So, what do you think of this list? Cards that are more problematic in person than on the Crucible. Do you think I've missed any? Do you agree? Do you disagree? As ever, we can comment, you can email, Facebook, Twitter, all the usual stuff. Love to hear your thoughts on any of those cards, any you think I should have added to the list, and any that you think shouldn't be there. Thank you for staying with me again to the end of another Captain's Commpod. I appreciate it very much, and as ever, may the Forge be with you.